Hello, everyone. I am Sanji Himura with Medamark Redux, or How I Stopped Worrying and Loved Crypto Bros. I am joined today by our panel from yesterday's live stream. We are going to assume at the present time that you know or have watched part one of Medamark. So let's get this conversation started by going to roughly 2017. In 2017, a man by the name of Kevin looked at the trademark database and said, Medabots is ripe for the taking. Is that a fair assumption?
More or less. Basically what happened was the trademark expired, I want to say prior to that actually, when it was held by the current owner of the time, Kodansha, which was responsible for the localization of the anime. So when the Medabots trademark expired, it was still under their name, and that's when Mr. Kevin Kamaduran had picked it up.
Hmm. So, the mark basically was ignored for 2 years. Is that is
Thereabout.
thereabouts? And we have, and we had information that Imagineer never knew about it.
Um, I probably that much I'm not 100% sure on. Probably because it was slept on so much and had such a long hiatus of no one messing with it. It probably was a out of sight, out of mind kind of thing more than anything else. And then
Mm-hmm.
when they realized, oh, what happened to the trademark, then they started trying to figure out what exactly happened.
Okay. Now, crate writ. Well, let's be a kind of honest here. There are a lot of people who invested time and energy into this research, and some of them may not be want to be credited. So we are going to honor that request by saying that we will not credit them in the primary research. So
But
um
their efforts will definitely not go wasted.
on yes. So Kevin decides to hatch a crypto scheme. Is that pretty much the long and the short of it?
The TLDR of it, essentially. To break it down in more detail, development actually found out that it was not Kevin originally who had the idea to make it crypto based. It was one of his partners, essentially, that came on board later, by the name of Jonathan, who essentially was trying to advocate for it as a way to. I'm not 100% sure of all the reasons he advocated for it, but essentially a case of amping up more hype and getting a profit for it, especially trying to join the crypto scheme, which a lot of people seem to be jumping on these days. As a way, it's a unmoderated form of currency generation, and they figured that'd be a nice way to make a quick buck.
So in other words, money laundering. Is that a fair assumption?
I mean, if you put it that way.
uh, so as you know, in any type type of money laundering scheme, it's bad 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 money goes after good money. No, it's good bad money gets washed into good money. So uh so what so um I fronted this information over to Ani. What what
Uh,
yeah.
so
So
from what I've seen, they do have some type of white paper, more like a business model for their token. Um, Basically, they told me while I was in there. Discord server that they just copy and pasted the Safe Moon contract, but it doesn't look of the sort. I haven't verified it, but it's not really about the contract and the audits that they say that everything is fine because the audits don't pertain to the holders per se. They just look see if the contract is nice and neat, and then from there, they just let it be. You know, um, yeah, for the most part, they're trying to create infinite money, and they're also creating a little bit weird stuff with it. By the giveaways and the cashing out of the R&D wallet and all like.
Mm.
But yeah,
Okay,
uh,
so yeah. We have information that the contract was copied.
from what they say, but it doesn't necessarily. It, it I could create a malicious contract in real life and have you sign it, but it's not malicious unless anyone acts on the malicious parts of the contract, right?
Right.
I mean, perpetual contract is cool, so as long as both parties act on it, um, then it becomes not so cool. That's kind of the same thing here. So could be a copy contract, but we look towards who owns the tokens, um, which I'm not so sure about anymore.
There is one thing that I did find rather interesting in the short research that I did on cryptocurrencies, just to kind of understand exactly what it was that was going on as someone who's never been into it. And a term and phrase that I saw tossed around a lot between a lot of professional folks that are into this thing was something called the greater fool theory. Does that ring a bell to you at all?
The greater fool theory, from what I understand about it, is it's almost exactly what we talk about in the tokens space. Um, um, so basically, like I can have a whole bunch of bags of something and try to go and sell it to people, and I can sell it onto a market, and it can keep on going up and up and up. So as long as people are willing to buy it at higher and higher prices,
That's
but
that's kind of the short that I got out of it too, is along the lines of in order for you to make profit, someone has to pay more than you did for it.
yeah, which isn't always bad. It's like we do this in the stock market, but we don't really care about it so much because we have hedge funds and all like we have many more hands inside a single stock than we would have in a token that just created overnight with no filings, no nothing. Because creating a token out of thin air doesn't require any regulation behind it. And so basically what these people try and do is create basically free giveaways or airdrops, as known as the crypto space, and hope that these people don't necessarily dump their holdings onto the market um, for as much as the liquidity pool demands. You know, um, so basically, that's kind of what these people are hoping on. But if you check like the Poo Coin chart, Um, it doesn't look that good because you can see people dumping thousands of US dollars like every hour. You'll see people dump thousands of US dollars worth of BNB or worth of Meta back to BNB. But it gets a little bit fishy because they spread all these tokens out so far and wide that how do we know, like, if this isn't insider stuff? How do we know that Dev isn't giving his wallet a bunch of these tokens and then we'll dump them at a later date, small amounts to make it look like the market is going smoothly and, you know, all that sort.
We had a lot of suspicions of that too, because they would, even if we tried to genuinely ask them questions on the development or the coin, even if we weren't for it, just asking what exactly is going on, they seemed really, really dismissive over it, just in terms of just our interactions with anyone that's following the coin, regardless of how loyal they are to it or whatever. They seemed really shifty on a lot of things. And at the first question you'd ask, they say, look at this document, it explains everything. But it didn't look like they put a lot of information or effort into explaining said document. Primarily just the promise that the coin will be great, trust us, this totally isn't a scam, LOL
Right.
XD. And we're like, okay, this doesn't seem 100% legit. So when we try to genuinely call them out on it, they start tossing out an insult apparently to them that's called FUD, FUD, or calling us fudders because we don't believe the coin will be huge.
So there's a few things to like go look into a little bit. But I'd like to start this out with something that Mudahar or some ordinary gamer said. Men lie, women lie, but the blockchain doesn't lie. So basically saying we can go through the blockchain and see the irregularities that come with it, but we don't necessarily need to look at that to see how a coin or token does, because it shouldn't just live off of hype. Because no one is hyped to go get $1 or €1. That the currency doesn't live off of hype. Like we don't have people like Jake Paul saying the US dollar's so great, you guys should, have more of this. We don't need that. Um, so with tokens, you need to create um like you need influencers to push it.
Hmm.
You need to airdrop it. You need to um, take it like if you're trying to sell your music and you're trying to do it independent, how do you get your music out there? You have to go through every single channel and basically try to get as many plays on your music as possible. So eventually it can take off. The same thing that happens here. If no one knows about the token, then where do we go from here? All right, let's push it onto the masses. And, with this, let's link it with something that already has a community behind it. Will they want to buy some, crypto tokens behind it? Maybe.
It would probably explain all the unnecessary spamming that we've been seeing on their communities.
It would explain a lot actually. Like their Discord and how that I'm currently looking at meta shilling category that has 4 channels in it saying shilling, shill rank, shilling announcement, and shilling templates, which I own backups of this entire Discord server in case they try to deny any of this stuff. So, and they're using shilling and they're not using a better term for it.
Yeah, and the one thing I did notice too, again touching on the spamming and the communication, is that it seemed like they really didn't seem to know how exactly they were doing it. It was mostly like they were just tossing bait all across the water and hope and pray that they
Someone
got
bites.
that someone bites. Yeah, and this honestly has been suspect in its own right too, because we've observed through their conversations as well that they've apparently been advocating for these shilling contests, pretty much as you described, Ani, but they're doing it in a way that actually outright breaks TOS of a lot of social media sites that these supporters are on. In this case, Twitter being one of the most prominent, meaning they're just going to go spam the same link over and over and over and over on a million different forums, completely unrelated, just because they happen to mention a particular hashtag that they're targeting. And this also seems to apply with any celebrities. So, say for instance, I'm just going to use the example Snoop Dogg, which they did actually try to reach out to. Snoop Dogg would make some random comment about cryptocurrency, even if he doesn't use the hashtag at all on his account, and all of a sudden you see these guys pop up 3 and 4 times in the comments saying, "Hey, have you heard of
Right.
this coin? You should try it." And it's not, I mean, advertising for something to show off, is one thing, but these guys are doing it so shamelessly that it's like, do you not have any kind of like confidence in the issue? You're just like mass spamming the whole thing and not really putting a lot of effort into it. Kind of
Nope.
a kind of like a lack of disrespect here.
or lack of
Absolutely.
respect. But yeah, um, my whole thing is, uh, I I will say this. There is a program that breaks the Discord TOS that allows you to view more things that you can. Well, now it's here for reasons, but I can see their member count inside their Discord, and currently they're touching 7,000 members. So my whole thing is there's only so much you can censor with a slow moving moderated company. um, a site like Twitter will probably act very slowly because we had a fit in the Bitcoin community with the Elon Musk scams, basically, where it was the old RuneScape thing. If anyone remembers, send me X and I send you 2X back. And it took, I'm pretty sure, years for YouTube to act on these types of scams. Um, and they still go about, but they're not as big anymore. So these companies will take a long time to act, especially if there's no negative press in the mainstream news. So until something forces their hand, it's going to take a long time. A lot of people will lose their money. Um, and a whole bunch of people will start being called FUD or fear uncertainty doubters. Um,
Basically,
but
people who are uncertain about the subject and just you have to believe, man. And if not, you just pudder.
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. And I mentioned this to friends of mine too as we observe this
Mhm.
issue. There's being zealous about something, much like how I am with the Medarot series, but then there's also being overzealous. And we've honestly feel that a lot of the behavior that they've shown, both in in their Telegram and in their Discord and even on Twitter, it kind of goes beyond even overzealous to the point where it's almost like a manifested cultist mindset. Like if you tell them, "Hey, these numbers don't seem to add up here. What's going on?" Even if you don't mean it maliciously, you're just saying, "Hey, these numbers don't add up. Can you explain why?" They're gonna look at you like you killed their dog, and they're gonna say, "How dare you question this? You don't know what you're talking about, you futter." And we're like, "We're
Bam.
just trying to ask a question here, man."
well, yeah, I can. This is pretty easily. I can feel a little bit extremely empathetic to these people because I do recall a time in my life where I was like this. But it's two things that can kind of go on here. One is these people have money invested, right? If I built up a $500,000 building and you came up to my building and said, I don't know if this building will protect you from the strongest of hurricanes, and I didn't see if you didn't actually have like details about it or anything. And regardless if you even did have details, I don't want to know my building that I spent 500,000 on could potentially be harmed by a hurricane. I don't want to hear
Absolutely.
about that really.
Mhm.
So and but doing it in a public space where they need influencers, any kind of critique is an extension of you critiquing their the value basically because they have money involved or they're trying to get money involved.
That is a
Um,
good point to bring up. So I can definitely see it on that front too. But like I mentioned, the fact that they're so overzealous to protect it, just kind of shows it's I'd say it's a different kind of ballpark essentially. But I can see where you're coming from though.
oh yeah, it's I always tell people to go back and look at the discussions surrounding GameStop and when that hype got drawn up and how much misinformation and how much uh like sentiment was towards to straight up defending GameStop by no reason other than they either have money involved or they cared about it as a kid. Um, these people will buy into extreme ideals sometimes, depending on how far their emotions run into it or how much they have invested. Because
On
people don't do these things because they're not invested into it, basically. Um,
Yeah, that is definitely is a good point. And just to touch on this further, I feel it is also important that we should cover the reception of not just positive towards the crypto scam in this case, but also just those trying to on the outside trying to figure out what's going on. I mean, just because of the research that we've done and posted, especially with a lot of friends of ours that put a lot of time and effort into exposés and research and tweets about this, and it blows the whole thing out. It explains everything very clearly, black and white, so that nothing can be misunderstood. That the it's just kind of interesting this in the case where a lot of communities that they were trying to aim for are now suddenly realizing, hey, this isn't quite what it's looking for, and it's led us to suspect that a lot of the following from Meta in this case, the cryptocurrency, I should clarify, is probably not 100% or even 50% natural, for lack of a better term. And I suspect a lot of it is maybe paid support. Like you have a lot of servers like in India or what place that are just paid to follow people or repost things.
Well,
I personally think that's a fair assessment to weigh in on. Sorry to cut you off, Ani.
no, you're good.
It's just that some of the influencers that we see in the meta space, like Jonathan, for example, or even there was even talk about what was that guy's name?
Bitcoin?
Bit Crypto Coin. Boy.
Bitboy?
Yeah, that's him. There was even talk that he jumped into the meta space, and he was like, yeah, he got one side of the story. He didn't get the actual story that we presented in part 1 or even some of part 2 of these videos. So what we have here is essentially a hard disconnect. Is that fair to say?
That's definitely a good way to put it. Getting information fed only from one side.
Yes.
It's much more than that too. You have to think about this because it's multiple layers as well. Like, um, how like think about this for a sec. Was anyone like, did anyone understand like stuff like Amway or
Can't say that
multi-level marketing?
I do know of, yes. And
Yes.
I've
Yeah.
heard a lot of rather negative feedback on just the general opinion and reception of MLM schemes.
Oh yeah, they're still pretty bad, but they exist though for a reason. Um, from the top down, this entire thing is like the whole reason why the IP is here for two things. One for clout and two for community, right? Um, basically saying like they say that they're going to create a game. Okay, lots of people hope on a game, right? Even like regardless of what you think, they announce that they are going to create a game. So that's one step into it, and they said they're going to create a token. Okay, good. This token will be integrated with the game, so maybe it has value if a game comes out. And another thing is the NFTs. So you have the NFT bros onto the space. So like the bad thing with it is you can easily kill your game project by just getting money off of crypto. So if they were going for the game first before the crypto, I this is bad because now they'll never have a game really. They'll have a sentiment that there will be a game, but we don't know because they're
Mm,
already making money off the crypto. So why would they want to make a game if they're already making money off the side business?
So
Um,
essentially, it's like putting the cart before the horse.
pretty
right.
much, pretty much.
Right.
Yeah, and we have noticed that particularly interesting pattern on that too, is when Kevin reached out, or it was Jonathan that reached out, not 100% sure on the story there, and they started partnering on that, and Jonathan advocated for the use of crypto into the game. It seemed rather heavy that he was pushing on that, less so on the game and more so on the currency. And when Jonathan, who apparently started taking more and more of the shots, calling more of the shots essentially, and Kevin kind of took a back seat where no one ever really sees or hears from him at all in regards to the project. when he supposedly went to the blockchain summit in Dubai and supposedly got a lot of big name investors to invest, the rumor is that he would have had a lot more support for it. And they said, yes, we absolutely want to finance, we're willing to finance you for a game. But the issue is they kept trying to push for the currency more than the game. So those investors backed out.
Yeah. So there's a few things here, and they might be a little bit touchy. Um, I'll, for my people that listen to the house, this will be a good one. There would be an episode where House calls this guy up for having a uh, no migraine for life injection. And then when House disrupted the whole thing, he's just like, why did you have to publish all your medical reports in some unknown journalist in a different language that isn't peer reviewed? Are you actually creating this no migraine medicine, or are you just looking for someone that's going to find this alternative cure somewhere that doesn't actually matter because no one ever tested it out? So basically saying, you know, I think they did get investors on board, and they're dwindling that guy's money away because if you look at their main liquidity pool, the Meta BNB, you'll notice that has about 3.3 million US dollars into it right now. Um, so basically saying they had to get that money from somewhere. I don't know if that was an initial investment, but if you look at like the deployer wallet, they don't have that much in there. So I think they're just gaining off of that and trying to uh in a tax advantage way steal whoever's money was involved in all this. Because they had to get the BNB that they sent off to the Pancake Swap hot wallet first just to create the liquidity pool. So unless they had million or $2 million startup, I don't know where the rest of this money came from.
Which
Um,
adds more fear and uncertainty in this case to where exactly this coin was coming from and who exactly is funding it. Because they seem really gung ho on advertising. Oh, we got, BitBoy Crypto. We got, two actors from the Breaking Bad series on board as, sponsors for this. But they're not really showing exactly what they're supporting. All they've basically said is, hey, if you support our coin, we'll make a bot for you in our game. But they're not showing anything of the game either.
Well, there's another
Yeah.
thing too, right? So, I'll be completely transparent here. I didn't know who BitBoy was. I just Googled him, and I look at his deals section on his website, and it's basically him pushing the referrals of all these different exchanges. Um, Basically, every single click here is a shortened link, which probably goes to a referral. There's the Ledger Shop with a referral code, VPN. Basically, anyone that talks about crypto and that doesn't have, um, like, you should stake something into it. Like, what are you doing to better crypto besides talking about it? Because that does nothing. Because I see BitBoy right here, and he's got a weird Bitcoin logo on the O. Is he a miner? Is he I don't care if you're a trader. I wanna know, like, do you know the protocol? Are you talking about Taproot that just got, what's it called, like, the protocol just updated today for Taproot? Is he even talking about it? Probably not. He's probably talking about the price of these things, but, like, these
Mm.
people don't have, um they don't have, like, some intrinsic value to give to this space. They talk about it a lot, but when you see, like, all their badges, like, I can't tell. Is this NASCAR? Like, why are you wearing Bybit and VPN and Femex, logos on you? Um, what are you doing, really? Um, but he probably has a bunch of rep behind him, right? Like that Kiyosaki guy, broke dad, rich dad, or whatever. He talks about all these things, and he's a hype man, basically. So I can tell you by seeing all these referrals and stuff, and whoever sponsors this guy has, he probably got some money out of this. He's probably part of the influencer, takeaway that they announced in the meta thing. So I wouldn't doubt that he has some meta only from being the influencer that puts stuff out there, which he doesn't care if he instantly dumps it and makes you lose money on the other side,
He already got
that
his share.
exactly. Like these little deals where you announce something like one time is a come and go. You pay me in Meta, you should have paid me in another currency so I don't wipe the market. But you chose Meta, I'm gonna dump it to go get my dollars in USD or another crypto that I'm invested in.
Hmm.
I mean, that's basically how it goes here. Like you see it all the time. Like look at what was that one token? The Save the Kids.
Yeah,
Oh
Yeah,
save the
yeah,
save
all
kids.
kids. Yeah.
influencers got Save the Kids. Look at Mudahar going through the blockchain, and oh, you received it on this time. Oh, and he dumped all of it but one the next hour. Okay, he wasn't trying to save the kids. I guess he was just trying to save his money.
Meanwhile, we also got through, yeah, as we have said earlier with the Mudahar, the blockchain doesn't lie. So we also got to know who was the people who actually believed in the cause and who actually did as they said they would. So
Yeah,
there were,
exactly.
through the investigation, we also found, or Muda found that there was actually one person who wanted to do what the
Yeah,
mission
he
of
never
Save the
sold.
Kids was. Yeah,
He
he
never
never
sold, but
sold.
still got
He
punished.
he bought more.
Yep, with his own money.
Yeah.
I mean, so there are some good things about all this, but for the most part, like all these tokens that just live on hype aren't good. There could be so much more for these, but there's no like useful implementation to it, you know? And it hurts the crypto community. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
I like there's so many implementation you can, but all these people waste it on these startups and try to profit from other people basically become bag holders, you know? And it hurts the scene. It hurts the discussions, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah, like
Uh,
if you remember back, like this is going completely different from crypto though, but just to see how bad a hype train can actually be. One of the like things that stand out most in my eyes because this is so it was such a massive failure and just extreme hype train crash. The original Watch Dogs on release, at least on PC, that was a garbage fire of a hype train when the game landed.
Right.
Everybody was disappointed, and the thing is, when you believe hype and you believe it in it so much without seeing anything critically, you will get disappointed. If you don't critique things, if you just trust stuff blindly, you will be hurt, you will be disappointed, and you will not get the end result you are wishing for.
That's
That's
why
essentially
100%.
yeah. Go ahead.
that's essentially why something else I found with my research of crypto was even professional shillers, crypto sharks that do this thing, for a lot of money as a livelihood. um, they all say the biggest thing you need to do is do your research. And so the biggest questions they tell you to ask yourself is, first of all, are they reputable? Do they have someone behind the name that has had success in other projects? If it's a big name that's trying to start the coin, um, that one of the other questions that they have you ask yourself is, what will you own out of it? So kind of like how the stock market works, where you buy a share of a company, which means you own a small percentage of that company until you cash it out and trade it in, essentially. Crypto kind of works the same way, to my knowledge, where what we're saying, what will you own by cashing in and investing in the coin, and how likely are the devs or the creators of the coin willing to uphold that promise that you will have what they say you will own.
It's tough because you talk about the underlying value when you go into the stock market, but it's not. If I were to ask, like, say, of example company that has $50 million on the books and has some good cash inflow and all right? That doesn't necessarily determine the price of the stock, right? It just determined on the market sentiment. Because look at it, we go back to it, GameStop, $400 a share, but they were basically losing money.
Mhm.
They were doing very bad. So there's no reason why GameStop has $400 share, billions of dollars in market cap. There's no reason. So I obviously it was short lived, and to say at least I got involved into it. I will hold my $300 GameStop shares till my kids die. Um, but it basically you're not paying for the underlying company. You're hoping that uh, some hedge fund doesn't own like 90% split across many companies that will dump on you within a minute's glance. And, the SEC does whatever they want. Um, but yeah, you are correct. How do we know that there will be value produced inside the asset that I bought? Um, well, can't really know that. That's why I can't call the Metacoin a scam right now. I can say that wow, the contract looks a little bit fishy. The holdings will look a little bit sus,
And
but I can't know that it won't go anywhere or will go somewhere until someone dumps it all or enough dumping will happen to make this basically a pump and dump per se.
And we basically have the same kind of mindset too. We're a lot of the reason a lot of us call it a scam primarily is mostly just because we're frustrated over it. Because one of the biggest reasons that this even came into the limelight in the first place was because when Kevin bought the trademark, and this was completely before he chose to create, work on a game or invent or implement crypto or whatever, when Medarot S came out in 2020, it made release for about 2 or 3 months roughly, and then they were hit with a lawsuit. Imagineer was hit with a lawsuit from Kevin over the trademark rights in the EU where he bought the trademark. And his stipulations to that was that Medarot, the original name, quote unquote, sounds too familiar to his trademark that he purchased, which is Medabots. Um, Big red flag there, but I won't go into that discussion. So, because of that, the general TLDR of what happened from that lawsuit was that it barred Imagineer from posting or sharing or releasing anything under the name Medarot or Medabots at all or whatsoever in the EU. And unfortunately, because the EU is, that first step across the pond to reach a lot of us Western fans, that essentially barred any potential hope that we had in the meantime of getting anything localized or finally getting that attention from Imagineer to see the series get that reboot that we all believe that it deserves.
Right.
so just quick question about this, because do you know if it is just in the EU or if it's in the extended European Economic Area?
Based on what I understand, after Imagineer realized that one of the trademarks fell off, sans the lawsuit, they were very quick to pick them back up again everywhere else. So right now, as it stands, completely contrary to whatever Kevin or Jonathan or any one of their followers or supporters will tell you, Kevin currently owns the trademark, and I'm going to specify that as well because they seem to get those two crossed. They exclusively own the trademark only in the EU for the name Medabots. That's spelled BOTS, not ROT, as in the original name.
Yeah, because like the only reason I'm asking if it is in only the EU or if it's in more of the extended European area, because you have a lot of you have countries that are not a part of it. Okay,
Right,
like
I gotcha.
yeah,
To
just like
my
Switzerland, yeah, Ireland,
to my knowledge, I want to say it's just going to be kind of a general area
yeah.
when mentioning with the EU because our friends Callie and GMC who are with us in the previous episode, they've made comments before. We all play Medarot S, the mobile game, and have
Hmm.
various methods of being able to install it, but they are unable to make any in-app purchases for the game at all because they live in the EU region. Whereas
Or
me,
in
who lives
European region, yeah.
Correct. Whereas me, who lives on the Western Coast, I'm able to make in-app purchases in the game just fine, which includes the monthly row battle pass they implemented a couple months ago. So I
Yeah.
have no issues and I can purchase things fine. but because of where they're living and the issues with the lawsuit, they can't do anything aside from just install the game and be strictly free to play players, even
Yeah,
if they
and
wanted to spend money on the game, which they have expressed interest in doing.
yeah, and
Right.
even the way of installing it is by side channels because they can't do it directly through an app store. They have to get the install files through a third party and install the APK,
Correct.
not anything through the direct app store on the devices they own.
Correct. And in some cases, you can kind of skirt that. Say, for instance, if you're using an Apple device or an Android device, there are different approaches. But like you said, you do end up having, in order to even install the game that's not in your region, you do need to go outside as like a third party or a backdoor, as some people call it, just so you can have it installed on your device, which really isn't none the wiser that the app is region locked. All it cares is, oh, you got an app, cool, you want to play it?
Right. So basically what we have here is, because Medabots and Medarot is locked behind Kevin's trademark, it's so we have failure to communicate all around, basically.
I would say so, yeah, to a degree. One of the other big issues with it as well is, well, that and one thing that we've seen primarily in their communications and whenever they like to proudly boast and post links about their Metacoin, is they don't seem to quite understand the difference between a trademark and an IP. Because there's a lot of comments on their posts, even from, supposedly Jonathan himself, who's one of the head devs, that claims that they own the IP to Medabots, where that is also completely untrue.
Yeah.
And just to break that down briefly, for the sake of mentioning it for discussion, a trademark is simply nothing more than a name. So, say for instance, in this case, as an example, let's take Pokemon. The name Pokemon, also another variant, is Pocket Monsters. Both of those are trademarks in this case. They are names that are registered to an account. An IP, or an intellectual property, is the actual, for lack of a better term, product that the name is representing. So in this case, Pokemon Pocket Monsters are representing the trademark, the product that they are servicing. And it's the
Right.
same case with Medabots, Medarot and Medabot, both of which translate back and forth very easily and near flawlessly. If you were to toss it in DeepL or Google Lens or Google Translate, they will translate back and forth seamlessly. They are simply nothing more than names, trademarks to the franchise itself, Medarot. And I'm not quite sure how they kind of have this confused, even when the documents that they share around saying that we own it only say strictly trademark. So that adds
Yeah.
another level of frustration to the issue, because even if we try to correct them and say, no, Imagineer is fully in their right to release it under this name, they say, no, it's not because we own it.
So the thing is, another funny case. This is trademark law that is an extremely funny case because of how large the company behind it is. Here where I live, Norway, Apple does not have the trademark for iPhone, and they cannot own it because it was in use before Apple made the iPhone in Norway.
So it's kind of the same case here, more or less.
Yeah, because the name was already in use. They can sell under the name of an iPhone. They cannot be the sole distributor or sole user of that trademark.
That's what I was wondering too. Did it ever occur to anybody here that Imagineer would license out their like IP rights to Kevin and all? Like, why wouldn't they just go through the proper channel to license the IP instead of creating a kerfuffle inside the courts? It just doesn't make much sense to me because I understand, with the Craig S. Wright, he's basically trying to take down like the Bitcoin white paper because he tells the courts he believes he owns it. He owns the rights to it. He doesn't though. But this is different with Metabots because I'm pretty sure Imagineer would allow someone to license, their IP. I mean, it can't be that much, Um,
Right. And it's
but they
nothing more
just
than
have
a
to
simple
go.
meeting.
Yeah, they're just going they have to take it up with the courts and battle it out there for what? Like, was it solved? They've already created the coin, so they already encroach upon, the IP to some extent. Because
Right.
this right here doesn't look good for Imagineer's, IP by having this coin out there that they don't own at all. Um,
Right, and the courts actually, and the documents that we've seen that mention the cancellation pending requests from the petitioner, in this case, Imagineer. I've taken a look at those documents as they've been shared around in our, in conversation, and basically the TLDR of those conversations is Imagineer, or rather their lawyer, essentially sitting down with whoever's representing Kevin, and says, "Okay, so we released a game called Medabots with with this title, this box art, and on this year." And in these regions. Have you ever heard of it? And the response from Kevin was, no, never heard of it. So Imagineer says, next, we've released a game called Medabots in this region under this name and in this year. Have you ever heard of it? No, Kevin says once again. Okay, we've released another game called Medabots in this region on this year, and a couple of years later, we also released those same titles on, say, the Wii U Virtual Console. Have you heard of these? Kevin once again says no.
No.
So that leads
Sounds
a
like a
lot.
deposition.
Correct, and that's led to a lot of questioning over the integrity of the development team that's trying to create this game outside of Imagineer, because they claim it's supposed to be a new generation of Metabots with new characters and not touch the old ones. Yet he turns around and says he's never heard of it before. I'm not sure if I'm the only one here, but that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
No, it makes
No, it
complete
doesn't.
sense.
Oh.
It makes complete sense in term. Man, how do this is gonna be tough to explain. And I know any lawyers that listen to this will probably be like, "Yeah, he's right, but man, he just says it wrong." Um, Basically, like it's kind of like if I accuse a company of doing some wrongdoing, right? Let's
Mhm.
say man, who can I say? Man, this is a bad example. If anyone remembers the BP oil spill inside the Gulf of Mexico in the US, um,
Yes.
if anyone did like say like only a few people seen that oil spill, all right, and someone's just like, oh well, my business got damaged by it, so I accuse, I think it was BP that did it. If I go up and say like, well, BP, we're in this deposition or whatever have you, uh, do you understand that your company leaked so many gallons of oil inside the ocean? Well, admission of guilt with them saying, well, yeah, we know, you know. So deny everything until you
And
take it to court
willfully
and
play
fight it out.
ignorant.
Exactly. It's bad, but no business, no right-minded, business-minded person will just admit guilt right then and there
And I can
because
definitely see where you're coming from. Yeah.
yeah, because I would rather spend X amount of money having the courts rule on this than me admitting guilt and losing money right now.
I can definitely see that. And I guess that does kind of tie into what we've seen Imagineer do, where essentially they petitioned to have extensions done. I think the most recent one will close on Christmas, where it's basically trying to, the way I'm understanding this anyway, and I'm no lawyer or crypto expert. The way I understand this situation is they're essentially trying to give Kevin a chance to explain himself and kind of defend his arguments, before the courts, of course, so that they have it, so he has an option to be able to protect himself against the coming lawsuits. And in some cases, you could say it's Imagineer trying to, give him a sporting chance in this case, because they probably don't think too much of this coin or the situation either. But in recent, one of the biggest developments that's been creating a very large amount of praise and hype in the Medarot community currently, not just on the JP front, but also here on the Western front that follow the OG Metabots, is that the courts just recently ruled in approval of opposition, as they phrased it, which translated is roughly the courts telling Imagineer, okay, if you want to take Kevin to court over this and settle it once and for all, you have our permission to.
Mhm.
Interesting there. So basically, we're gonna be hedging on how much these like Kevin can make off the crypto versus how much Imagineer will spend in the courts. Um,
Right. That's
my
actually
whole
another
thing, I looked it up.
argument someone brought up too,
I
is
looked
they're
it
trying to
up,
it's essentially like they're trying to play chicken over, which company's willing to back out first.
well, especially like um two different domains, and I don't know how big Imagineer truly is. I looked up their stock and it was like 10 JPY, which didn't translate that well, but I didn't look at their market cap or anything.
Right.
But if Imagineer still has a game out there that's has cash flow going through it, I assume that they're willing to go and battle this out. And if my math is correct, let's just say they pump and dump this token and they receive 1.5 to 2 million USD of it. I don't know if Imagineer owns like it's a big company to where 2 million is just like nothing to them. I assume so. I mean, you wouldn't have a franchise and all this stuff, but
Right.
um, even then, I don't even know if the courts know that this token exists. So if they were to pump and dump this token, and that is evidence and showing that Kevin owns it, and he basically scammed these people, it's not gonna look good for his what you can classify as his trademark, I guess. Um,
Absolutely.
so it's a weird kind of balance here.
Absolutely, and we've actually have noticed that too when we try to keep an eye on the fluctuation of the coin's value. Now, granted, any value it has is going to be stuck behind no less than 3 zeros. So, putting it jovially, the coin currently is less than dirt. But what we've
Yeah.
seen in their growth chart is that they'll look relatively consistent but keep going down progressively. And then when they get to a certain point, it'll spike by like 0.0002 at the highest, and people say that the coin is rising. But then I believe it was Sanji and maybe a couple other folks as well that made note and kind of tracked their patterns and how people are cashing out on this. And they're
Yeah.
cashing out like that when it's super low. But then they also hold shilling contests, which go back into these, mass spam and shamelessly sharing this thing on Twitter with celebrities and harassing them to try to get the coin back up and hype it.
Um, Definitely correct there. I helped him with a little bit of that. Especially because we tracked a 150 million meta sell off, which they claimed was the R&D. Um, but that's the weird thing because I said before, like if you look at the audit's fine, but it doesn't really tell you a lot about it. It just tells you how things are, not how they will be. Um,
Hmm.
Basically, it like a few things to be mentioned is like um the dev wallet has renounced ownership and he can lock and unlock the liquidity pool lock because every transaction that you make, regardless if it's a buy or sell, if I even send you any meta, 5% of that gets sent back to liquidity pool, all right?
As
Which
a
the
tax,
liquidity pool,
essentially.
exactly. But there are some wallets that have the whitelist, which I've been going through. Um, Now the developer is on that whitelist, and he owns 4.5%, maybe even 5% of the liquidity pool right now. Which 5% of the liquidity pool, when the liquidity pool has 333 million US dollars into it right now, um, it doesn't look that good because yeah, he could probably get a lot out of that. Plus, we don't know liquidity pool stakers. That's the bad thing about all this because you can stake it on that fresh website of this year named SafeSwap, which they probably made because they're pushing that the most. Um, so it gets a little bit funky because if the 5% tax is just going straight to the dev wallet's hands, I don't know how I feel about that per se, because then he can basically keep on controlling the market. Um, it's also weird that you have multiple wallets um, that are whitelisted, and even in their Discord, they one of the admins admitted to me that one of the wallets that I found was used for them to cash out that was whitelisted, so they don't get taxed. Um, And when I said like, well, the dev wallet has the whitelist, don't you think the dev will dump? And I don't even know if I was talking to Kevin or whatever because they're different names. Um, and they said, no, there's no need to worry about that. Like we trust them. I always thought that crypto wasn't based on trust. I always thought it was verify, don't trust.
Yeah.
But I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's another red flag, absolutely. Is they're basically trying to tell people, trust us, we know what we're talking about,
Mhm.
this will be huge. But a lot of the goals that they've mentioned, they just don't seem to really add up or seem feasible. Like if you look at their website, for this whole thing, they say that, first, and this is before all the recent developments, they said they were going to have a 20 million player user base by the end of the first year, and they were going to have 5 million, 5 billion of that or a million of that in US and China and in other nations. But
How
then
can
Except
they
like
Japan.
guarantee that?
yeah, and then about 2 or 3 months after that, guess who officially bans crypto and basically killed about 75 quarter of their projected player base?
I
China.
assume. Oh, right. It was China. I was going to say it was Epic Games. Same shit.
Yeah, China banned crypto, I think probably about 2 months after that their website went up with those numbers. And I'm like, well, so much for that. And then they
I
said they
mean,
want to release they want to release a game on each platform, like the Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, Steam. They
Yeah.
even mentioned a quote unquote feature length movie too. I'm like, and then guess again, who else gets to ban crypto? It's Steam. So now that's that's another outlet that they've officially been shut out of.
well, the thing about China was also that market was also going to be cut out because of the restrictions they put into place on gaming for kids and everything like that. Because
Correct.
yeah,
Well, all this stuff shouldn't matter, right? Like, think about this, all right? Um, just think of like the uh anti-moral business sense here. No socialists, don't attack me. Um, but if you think about like, all right, to get the app, if it's gonna be on mobile devices, I'm gonna have to side load it through a Shadow Socks proxy so I can get into the out of the intranet that China imposes on me. So I'm going to bypass the ISP restrictions, I'm going to bypass the gaming restrictions, and I'm going to bypass the crypto restrictions because I'm basically essentially using a VPN. Um,
Yep.
but even then, why would any of that stuff matter to something that a game that's never come out yet, a token, or a token, which is basically a derivative of what's called Binance Smart Chain, BNB. Um, it didn't even. Why would it ever impact? Because that whole thing was brought up about all the miners, all right, because they were using electricity, and this is like the 40th time that China wants to ban crypto. They'll come back next year, don't worry. Um, but like all the Bitcoin miners had to go to a different place, maybe Laos or whatever countries that allow it, if they could get out per se. So I mean, like the China ban doesn't really matter because they'll they
not
truly
for the
will never
crypto
be
scene.
on. Yeah, they won't be on an official platform anywhere. I mean, it's not like they're combating with Tencent. I mean,
I mean, the whole point of crypto being decentralized is just you never know where it's going to pop up. Sure, it might be banned in China, but there's still hundreds of other countries out there.
yeah, which is
Exactly.
even funnier because they have the digital might have this wrong. I don't want any people to hate me, but they have a digital dollar over there that they introduced around the time they banned crypto either this year or last year. So that's the main reason why they want to ban it because they want their own CBDC up there, which is basically a distributor of their own currency, but in like a decentralized form. So I can trade if I can create a pair on PancakeSwap for Meta to the what's call it Chinese digital dollar if I wanted to, because China can't really control that if I get out of their what's call it um I guess I don't want to call it like intranet, but it kind of is because they don't allow you on Facebook and stuff. basically you can get out of that, you can trade their digital dollar for Meta. So that's another shining example. This shouldn't really matter.
Right. It's at least worth noting, though. Just the just the timing of all this, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
But kind of just touching on the game too that they supposedly want to launch. They keep advocating for all this and have all these trailers launch, well, quote unquote trailers, I'm going to call them, of models that are launching. But there's a lot of red flags too. And with friends of ours that are in the game dev or established game devs that have published games, especially on the Nintendo eShop of all places too. So they know what they're doing, they know what the system's like, and they pointed a lot of these out. Some of the biggest things they mentioned is that they're showing the same footage, quote unquote footage, over and over for these trailers and just rehashing different parts of it essentially as proof that they have more than one video essentially. But then some friends of mine did some digging just to look at these videos that they're posting, and they noticed some rather interesting features. One of the biggest and most notable of many is that a lot of the assets that they're using for their stages or for anything else were all purchased from the Unity store, which in the game dev community is called asset flipping, which really largely contradicts something else that the meta community is trying to advocate, which is we have AAA devs on our team.
Which isn't true.
Correct, because again, these game dev friends of mine tell me if you are in a AAA game dev, or even not, let's disregard the AAA. If you are a game dev, all right, with decent clout to your name, you essentially make all your own stuff. I mean, you can use stuff from an asset store as like a stand-in or heavily modified, but to use it as is, or maybe just swap a couple textures and essentially do what's called asset flipping, that's considered a big no-no in the game dev community, I'm told.
Yeah, it is very much a big no-no, and a company that was heavily criticized and went to ruin for it is the ever lovely Digital Homicide, which made a lot of horrible asset flips. Another one is called Guise of the Wolf and Day One's Incident. Those are games that, for example,
Mhm.
had a lot of assets like that or other types of controversy in them. It's just that type of behavior and just those types of actions in the game scene is just they will be called out with good reason, and a lot of the times sometimes people even buy an asset pack, make no changes to it, just release it as a game, because some people make essentially a game as a baseline where people can build on.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And that's why I said, there's nothing wrong with buying assets from the Unity store because that's what they're
Right.
there for. But the
yeah,
catch to it is you don't use them as is.
yeah,
Basically buying an asset, like say for instance, let's say I buy a Cyberpunk City backdrop, or, a background in slight world stage, from the Unity store for $90. That
yeah,
$90 basically tells me I'm free to do with it as I need, but that also to an extent also excludes monetary gain.
yeah,
All that $90 it allows is the license in this case that I can use this product in my stuff or as a baseline for me to build my own items. So
Yeah.
if I wanted to do this the right way, I would buy that, Cyberpunk stage from the asset store for $90. And of course, that's almost $100 down. Of course I'd want to put it to good use.
Yeah.
I would take those assets, kind of figure out what I'm working with, and then I would make changes to it to personalize it to my own way. So that would include modifying textures or using my own, changing up some items or locations of items, adding things, taking things away, basically heavily modifying this thing. Keywords here, heavily modifying to make
Mhm.
this item exclusively mine.
But also, like with the whole franchise that we are talking about here, Medarot, that is a genre, like that's a type of game where you are essentially meant to be able to interswap assets, and they are supposed to fit together no matter what you do, almost.
To an
So,
extent,
like,
there are a couple, yeah, there are a couple mechanics that have limits on what can and can't be swapped out, but
yeah,
primarily, yeah.
Yeah, so that means that any part should be able to fit together and blend into its own robot, essentially, when you have built it completely.
Exactly.
Meaning that each asset cannot just be taken from random places. You need to create those assets with that in mind. You cannot take random things from all over the asset store and just slap it together. That would not bring forth the soul of the IP or the type of game you want to make.
That actually brings
So
up another very good point, though. We mentioned just the asset flips with their trailers in general, but something else that was noticed in the few trailers that they showcase of actual movement, and we suspect it's not even gameplay; it's just rigged, animated, an animated scene essentially.
yeah,
Because in
Right.
all their trailers, they only show two. Excuse me, they only show two bots that actually have some kind of animation. One at the minimum, two if it's their good trailer. But all the other robots that they highlight for this are all A posed.
meaning that for the
They're
people in the
they're unrigged essentially. They were essentially put together, but they did not have skeletons built to them.
So
meaning that
there's
they have
cinematic.
they have no structure in them to be able to be used in animation, movement, or
Exactly.
yeah.
That's the issue because in all their trailers they're only showcasing two of the same bots over and over. So all we can guess on them is, I mean, if they're all rigged, then we'll happily take that back. But just based
Yeah.
on what they're showing us, we're led to suspect they only have two models rigged and none of
Mhm.
the rest of them are, and they're just renders.
And for the
Right.
people who might not essentially follow this, but instead be very aware of bugs, it is essentially similar to characters in video games just T-posing without any animations. That
Yes.
is what we are talking about here.
They're basically just standing there in a pose, unrigged, meaning that the mesh of the model, the design of the model, is not rigged or attached to an armature or a skeleton that allows it that movement and animation.
Absolutely. So, getting a little close to time, I think. Is there any points that we missed, that we glossed over, that we want to go in depth over?
Yeah, I just had one libertarian question here. So what's wrong with taking assets that have an IP behind them? Can I just trademark them and say that they're mine?
That honestly, I think that argument's come up a lot too, and just based on the knowledge I have, a lot of companies, especially big name ones like Pokemon, for instance, are very careful over trademarking certain things. Like, for instance, you can't, make a creature and call it a Pikachu because you're going to have Nintendo breathing down your neck telling you take it out.
At least
But
Game
Mm-hmm.
Freak.
yeah, exactly. But with other companies, I think it kind of depends. And with
It's more
something
so
like,
of a meme. But
yeah,
I know you can't really do it because that's IP,
So, if you want one of the worst offenders when it comes to protecting their IP and being very strict about, if you use this, we will come for you. There's two companies that comes to mind. One of them being, of course, Nintendo and how they acted with anything on YouTube showing any of their games. The other major one is the House of Mouse, Disney themselves.
yep, can't forget the big mouse. Can't forget the mouse.
Of course we can't.
Honest, just going on that tangent briefly, I actually found it hilarious that Nintendo at one point, oh, no, I think it was Disney at one point that approached Nintendo trying to become financial partners or like buy them out, and Nintendo just laughed.
yeah, that's it's in a weird territory there.
Yeah, but you do bring up a good point, Red. Is those are two very big companies that are super protective over their stuff, and
Yeah,
I
like
mean, of course, if it's something you own, of course you want to be protective over it because you want to make sure that
Mhm.
there's no bad rep or anything that, gets linked to it. In the case with Nintendo as one example, it's kind of a two-edged sword in this case. Like on one side, there was once a lawsuit a few years ago where it was a go-karting company in Japan, where you could essentially just, take a go-kart on the roads and of course following road safety, drive the go-karts around the city. The issue is that they had Mario-based costumes that customers could buy and rent with the go-karts, and that of course got them in a lot of trouble because this go-kart company didn't quite do all the legal routes to use those costumes essentially. So Nintendo took them to court and won, and demanded that the go-kart company take everything like that down. Apparently, they didn't learn because I was told they did it a second time, and Nintendo took them back to court and won. Um, because again, it's a liability in this case. If something happened to one of those go-karts or a customer using them in those costumes, it's going to put Nintendo in the limelight that they don't need to be in or want to be in, because now
Yeah.
they're facing bad rep. On the other side of the coin, however, it does also mean that a lot of genuine fan projects. So for one of the biggest ones I'm going to mention with Nintendo Game Freak is the old fan game Pokemon Uranium. It was a
Nice.
really big thing that they were working on. New typings, new Pokemon, new mechanics and whatnot. Was going to make no money or anything off it whatsoever. It was just a fan project they did for fun.
I
And
still
Nintendo,
have the file for that.
yep,
I still need to play that.
yep. And Nintendo basically said, "Hey, nice fan game. Take it down, or we take you to court." So it's kind of a two-edged sword in this case where I can see where they're coming from, but at the same time, there's probably a little more paranoia behind that protection than there really needs to be.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And also, Nintendo doesn't really care about like taking their IPs and keeping them alive. If they are done with the game and it's done selling, you will never see it again. You have
Absolutely.
to like
That's
the
honestly. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. It's just the only way we can keep on playing Nintendo games is by maintaining the few copies we have of them and
Pass them
basically
under the table.
pass them under the table. Yeah, and sell
Yeah,
to
that's
third parties.
honestly why a lot of game devs, like for instance, I'm going to take MiHoYo and Genshin Impact in this case.
Yeah.
When Genshin Impact launched, they made it very clear that they're going to be very open to content creators. And when the game launched, they released MMD files of their characters for for public download, so anyone could use them. And I was reading a statement from MiHoYo recently, because of course there's a lot of artists and sellers and merchants on places like Redbubble or Etsy that made their own custom Genshin Impact related stuff. And of course, with
Yeah.
the issue of IP and trademarks, you got to be real careful with that. Because, like, if you try to sell a Mario themed lapel pin on Etsy, you might see your listing up there for a week before you get a cease and desist order. But
Right.
MiHoYo was apparently one of those devs that says, okay, guys, we love the support, we appreciate it, and we're going to let you do your thing. But there are a couple rules you need to follow. And they laid these rules out very clearly that says if you're going to make apparel, fan art, merch, cosplay materials, whatever it is, you're more than welcome to do it. But you just have to follow these simple rules and we won't bother you.
hmm I think that's fair. Um. So I'd like to thank our guests for joining us today. I'm sorry to wrap this up while we're on a tangent here, but we do need to get our show on the road because we have some things to do. So with that said, I am Sanji Himura. I'd like to thank Red Ray, uh, Ani, and Kuura for joining us today on the W2 Report Redux episode of Medamark. And with that said, I will see you guys soon, and I'll see you guys on the next one.